Hello, I'm your host Luke, and today I want to talk about the Laputans and how they looked over the people below them. Um, so, Laputa was a flying island described in the 1726 book Gulliver's Travel by Jonathan Swift. It's about 4.5 miles in diameter with an adamantium base, which its inhabitants can use or maneuver in any direction using magnetic levitation. It has a cave in the very center, which is precisely there to gather all of the rainwater. It is also used by the king to enforce his supremacy. Laputa was located above the realm of Balnabarbi, which was ruled by its king from the floating island. Gulliver states that the island flew by the quote magnetic virtue of certain minerals in the grounds of Balnabarbi, which did not extend to more than 4 miles above and 6 leagues beyond the extent of the kingdom, showing the limit of the range of the kingdom that it could go. The position of the island and the realm below is some 5 days' journey south-southeast of Gulliver's last known position down a chain of small rocky islands. The island of Laputa was described as wait, yeah. So in the center of the island, there was a chasm 50 yards in diameter, continuing down into a dome, extending 100 yards into the adamantium surface. And the dome served as an astronomical observatory and also contained the lodestone, which enabled the island to fly and move about the realm. The inhabitants of Laputa were the most catching of it. Laputa's population consisted mainly of an educated elite who were fond of mathematics, astronomy, music, and technology, but failed to make practical use of their knowledge, and the servants made up the rest of the population. The Laputans have had mastered magnetic levitation, and they were also very fond of astronomy and discovered two moons of Mars, which oddly in real life, this is 151 years earlier than the recognized discovery of the two moons of Mars. Um, their houses were ill built, lacking any right angles, and the clothes of the Laputans, which were decorated with astrological symbols and musical figures, did not fit, as they took measurements with instruments that were measured wrong. They spend their time listening to the music of the spheres. They believe in astrology and worry constantly that the sun will go out. Many of them have heads angled to one side, and they often suffer from strabismus, where one eye turns inward and the other looks, quote, up to the zenith, conditions that Swift used to mock the microscope and the telescope. Laputans were described as becoming so lost in thought that they cannot focus their attention on a conversation or avoid running into a tree or falling into a ditch unless periodically struck by a bladder full of pebbles or dry peas carried by one or two flappers or in their native language Clemenols hired for the purpose. Laputa was a male-dominated society where the wives would often request to leave the island to visit the land down below. However, these requests were almost never granted because the women who left Laputa never wanted to return. The men of Laputa were so abstracted in mathematical and musical calculations that they didn't even notice, and that their wives had left. I'll put it that way. Um, yeah. So I briefly wanted to talk about Castle in the Sky. Castle in the Sky was one of my Studio Ghibli movies that I loved watching growing up. Um, the basic premise is an ancestor of the Laputans, one of the last remaining ones. She happens to be of the royal family. Um, there's Potsu and there's God, what's her name? Doesn't really matter, but she's descended from the Laputans, which they have the castle in the sky, like this, but they were so highly advanced that it's amazing what they were able to build. Like this robot you see over there, this is a statue, a picture of a statue taken from the garden of the Studio Ghibli Museum. So thank you for whoever provided that photo, because I'll probably never get a chance to go there. But the Laputans were so far advanced ahead of their time, but they abused their power in the movie and were punished by the gods. Kind of like Atlantis, but instead of their city being banished to the depths of the ocean, they were banished and died off, I guess. Kind of interesting. I would honestly recommend to anyone to watch the movie. Great animation, great story. I feel they lean almost too heavily on. In the movie, the ancient civilization is called Laputans, and in like an interview with Hayao Miyazaki, he does admit that he drew heavily from Gulliver's travels with the Laputans, the city of Laputa, the castle in the sky, but he, I will say, did it justice. It's really cool. The main point of writing Gulliver's Travels was that it was a political satire of the time, but this guy didn't want to make anyone mad, so he had him going to all these fantastical lands and gave them crazy names and sizes and characteristics that were all meant to be symbolic or allegories. So, he could just say, oh, I just meant it as a fun anecdote or whatever. I just find it. The guy did a really great job. I have the book. I still need to read it. I'll get to it. So, what was Laputa meant to represent? The story of Laputa is a satire of the oppression of Ireland by England and the state of that helpless land in the power of a foreign government. The Academy of Legato is a thinly disguised take on the Royal Society of Dublin, but it applies to all countries blinded by science. Scientific learning was greatly extended in the 18th century, but Swift felt nothing but disgust for the host of quacks, mad inventors, promoters of schemes for obtaining untold wealth, and armchair technicians whose projects so captivated a gullible public that they brought about a financial panic of which the South Sea bubble was part of. So just bare bones. The flying island of Laputa is England, and the stationary island of Legato is Ireland. The king living in Laputa has never even been to Legato and thus has no real knowledge of their culture or their needs. And when they rebel, Laputa cuts off their means of survival and threatens to crush them literally by smushing them with the island. Or the flying city, right? That's directly above them. In the Laputans and their flappers, Swift is mocking them that they are so deep in thought that they have lost touch with practical concern. The ill fitting clothes and other disastrous projects that he mentions are a way of mocking the Royal Society, which at one point wanted to use scientific knowledge to make the crafts more efficient. Also, most of their takes or parts are not practical. Swift also mocked the vanity and emptiness of human desires by showing how the yada 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 yada. So the Laputans were, in my take, meant to illustrate that they were so wrapped up in their own devices that they didn't care about the outside world, but they still wanted to rule over it, which was like England in the 17 and 1800s, which ultimately led to their downfall. This has been your host, Luke. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe for more. My heart goes out to all the people that are suffering right now in Atlanta, and I hope you guys get better. I'll say my thoughts are with you. I'm not really a prayerful man, but I hope that means something. But I do believe love triumphs over hate. I hope you have a good night, and we will get through this. Thanks for watching.